21, 2018 meeting of the Hutchinson City Council. Linda, call roll, please.
Dave Line.
Here.
Hyros de Carvalho.
Here.
Soldner.
Here.
Inskeep.
Here.
Decker.
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Gary, good evening and thank you.
Good evening. Shall we pray?
Yes, please.
Our Father in heaven, we have much to give you thanks for the freedoms that are ours as Americans, for the prosperity that we enjoy, for the opportunities that come our way through life. And we're grateful this evening for those who serve us here in this chamber. We pray always for wisdom and discernment in the discussions and the decisions that take place that affect the citizens of our community. And Lord, just keep an eye out on those who are serving us out on the streets of our city as first responders and in other ways. Again, Lord, we return thanks in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Gary.
You're welcome.
Linda, next item.
Item 4, oral communications from the audience.
All right, this is the that time of the council meeting where there's an opportunity for members here in the council chambers to address the council on matters that are not already on the agenda. We would ask that you keep your remarks to 3 to 5 minutes, if you would, please. Anyone wishing to speak? Please come on forward, and we would ask if you, come forward, and if you give us your name and address, please.
My name's Mr. Self. I live at 1102 East 10th, Hutchinson, Kansas.
Thank you.
I was born here, 1953, at St. Teresa's Hospital. I don't know if anybody knows where that's at, but I was born and raised in an oil field environment. I saw the city prosper in those days, 50s, 60s, 70s. I went to Bueller, graduated in 72. These trying days of things that are not being taken care of in this city because of budget. You've lost a lot of people. You've lost a lot of the maintenance. I noticed that everything out here, your flowers and everything like that, your roads and everything like that, that's cosmetic. The real thing to be taken care of is like your 30-mile diversion ditches not being taken care of, cut. Now you're going to have West Nile liars coming in. Your ditches that we designed back in the 70s, Bockenberg and Holcomb, I did all the cross sections on that 30 miles. Those 30 miles, those diversion ditches were not supposed to hold water. They were to divert and make it drain. They're holding right now. You're causing all kinds of infestations. Just because you don't have the manpower and the equipment to take care of that. I look, and I've talked to Jeff and Brian of your staff here and everything like that. They said they don't have the money. Why? Why do we not have that? You had it. He had 19 people. Jeff had 19 people at one time. Now he's down to 9. You can't take care of things around here. What is this, 20 by 20 square mile city? That's not a lot to take care of as far as other things being done. I notice you're resurfacing the roads and stuff like that. That's great. It's all cosmetic though. The down thing is your everything taken care of as far as health and well-being of mankind. If I was a teacher, I'd give you guys all an F right now. Okay? I worked for a little city of Princeton down in Texas. There was 3 people of us that took care of that city. One was the roads, I was in charge of Parks and Recreation, and there was another one for sewer and water, okay? If one had something to do as far as, and we were all skilled labor. I could run heavy equipment, all that kind of stuff. Everybody else could too. If one needed help, the both of us, the other two, would help out. I feel that with that type of system, it worked and everything got done. We may have had to, like a sewer or water or something like that, need to be taken care of. We'd have to stay after hours. But it got taken care of and people went on about the business. I think that that could work here also, as far as having maintenance people skilled in all areas. If you're not having the people, if you're not having the amount of people working for you again, then that would be the way to go. Last thing, my closing comments. You can lead a human to knowledge, but you can't make him think. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Self. Others who wish to address us? Yes, Chief.
Good evening, Council. Dick Hutchinson, Chief of Police. I need to make the Council aware of the 2018 Edward Byrne Memorial Grant that we've received from the Department of Justice. It's a grant that we get annually. Over the last 10 years, the amount has decreased significantly annually. This year, the total award is $22,221. In the past, what we've done and what we will do again this year is we share a percentage of this with the Sheriff's Department. The agreement that we came to several years ago was that the city police department would take 69% of the grant and we'd give 31% of the grant to the Sheriff's Department. So this year, the police department share is $15,332 and the Sheriff's Department's share is $6,889. And what I need to make you aware of is that we plan to use the money to buy, replace some 10 to 15-year-old personal protective equipment, mainly respirators and the filters and canisters that go on those gas masks that are referred to now as respirators. So I just need to make you aware of that. And if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Is it pretty much just a given that we?
It's an automatic award.
It's an award. Just
Yeah,
have to make the formal application, and the award
We
is.
just have to fill the paperwork out, and then they send us the money. And they just every year in June or July, generally, they notify us that we received this amount of money, and then we start the paperwork after that.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Anyone else who wishes to address the council about anything that's not on the agenda? Seeing none. Next item, please.
Item 5, consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second. Motion and a second to approve. Is there any discussion? Call roll, please.
Dayblind,
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho,
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes. Next item.
Item 6A, public hearing to consider adoption of the 2019 budget.
I will move to open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Call roll, please.
Dayblind,
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho,
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes. Mr. City Manager.
John Deerdoff, City Manager, and Mayor Council. I thought what I might do is just take a few minutes during this public hearing to just provide a quick overview of the 2019 proposed budget and how we got to where we are today. Let me see here. Where do I push here to get this to go? So when we look at our budget calendar, we actually started our process in February where our department heads began work on their capital improvement program and their equipment needs. And then the months of April through May, we work on our operational budgets. And then we review our utility funds and what have you. May 8th, the council will remember that we had a retreat in up at the water plant. And during that retreat, we established two major directives that we took away from that, our staff did. And that was, first of all, that we had no mill levy increase this year. And secondly, that we take a look at the fund balance goal, where we were, and how we improve upon that. August 7th, we approved a not to exceed amount of spending, which we published, and that's for the public hearing here tonight. Mill levy, our mill levy for this coming budget remains the same, so there's no increase in our mill levy at 44.123. And again, that was one of the directives that the council gave at the May budget meeting. So visually, let's look at our mill levy history. I always like to look at that over the past 10 years. And when you look back in 2009, we had a pretty good jump there, followed by a dip there. For the next 5 years, we were pretty steady. Last year, we increased I guess it was 16. We had a small reduction, followed by a 1 mil increase in 2017. We had a slight increase in 2018, and then again, no increase for this year. Assessed valuation, this is obviously an important number, important figure to us, because it's how we figure the amount of property tax that we're going to be able to get. Our assessed valuation for the 2019 budget, the 2018 figure, was really a 1% increase over last year. So last year we were right at $307 million valuation, and this year we're looking at 310. So again, our valuation, you can see we've seen increases, but very small incremental increases in our valuation over the years. You know, we look at our expenses. Overall, the 2019 budget is actually 1% less than our 2018 budget, so we were able to improve there. The general fund, which this represents here, really represents the basic core services that the city provides: public safety, public parks and recs, planning, zoning, streets, administration. And as you can see from this graph here, the big blue part of the pie graph, roughly 69%, almost 70% of our expenses are related to personnel. And so that scenario makes it extremely difficult when we're faced with the need to reduce expenses, we're looking at staffing levels. And our 2019 budget contains the elimination of 10 positions. We're able to eliminate all but one of those through attrition, so vacant positions. And when we talk about headcount reduction, that's always a very difficult conversation to have. Really appreciate the efforts of our department directors for working with me and aggressively looking at what we can do to reduce our headcount. On the revenue side, of course, the big three: property tax, sales tax, and franchise tax. The sales tax represents 36% of our general fund revenues, followed by property tax at 33%, and then next at franchise tax at 15%. And so, again, we talk about this every year. We look at new revenue sources, and we're really pretty limited in what our revenue is, and it is totally reliant on property tax and sales tax. This graph here, hopefully you can see that, really reflects our spending versus revenues that we gain each year. And as you look at this graph, it's certainly not perfect, because there are years where we're actually spending more money than the revenue we take in that year. And we're able to do that because we had a pretty strong fund balance, and that's a conversation we had with the council for some time. But we did make some significant progress, I think, this year. And you can see here where we're nearly connected there at the very end of 2019. Budgeted wise, we're about $250,000 more in expenses than expected revenue in 2019. And so, again, I feel good. I think we made some progress there. Hopefully, and obviously, I've said this before, we're not going to spend 100% of our 2019 budget. So that should improve year-end 2019. So I feel pretty good about where we were at there. So. Fund balance, again, going back to the council's budget retreat, we spent a lot of time talking about that. Under our current fund balance policy, it says that we want a general fund ending year balance, that's our reserves at the end of the year, of $6.5 million. During that council retreat, we talked about that number. We looked at fund balance policies from other cities, thought maybe ours might be a little bit out of whack, a little higher than what it really needed to be. And so we looked at the GOFA, the Government Officers Finance Association. It's a national organization that recommends that you have a fund balance of approximately 2% or 2 months of your operating expenses. And so looking at our average operating expenses, our fund balance goal policy would be about $5.5 million. And so that's the goal that we're going to look at. We'll bring back that current policy to the council in the next couple of months and look at revising that. So really our projected 2018 fund balance, at the end of 2018, we're looking at about $4.5 million. And the council's goal was that we would end 2019 at 4.2. We knew we weren't going to get all the way to the 5.5, but we were going to work towards that. And again, I feel confident that 4.2 is probably going to be more than that because we're not going to spend 100% of our line item budgets. So again, progress I think made in that area. Looking at our street program, which is something that we like to always talk about, going back to 2014, we had some discussions at the council level that there was concerns about how much money we were annually budgeting for our street program. And it was really a case where our funding was not keeping up with the cost of streets, the cost of materials, cost of labor is going up, yet we were still funding it at 5 or 6 years ago levels. So council expressed some concern with that and asked staff to come back with some ideas and thoughts on that. And so actually back in April of 2014, we came, the city engineer, public works director, with a state of the streets presentation. And that report really focused on the importance of the timing of preservation, the timing of when we do preservation, looked at our current funding levels. It also looked at our peer cities and how much they're spending on their street program. And then looking at a recommended level of funding for our program. And so as a result of that, the council authorized in 2016 that we add $400,000 additional to our street program. And going back on that mill levy graph, you'll see that jump where we added that $400,000. So in 2017, the same as we had in 2016. In 2018, we actually cut $200,000 out of that funding level. And then in 2019, we cut another 100. So going back to what we did in 2016, adding the 400,000, we've taken away 300,000 of that. And again, that's part of the overall budget issues that we were dealing with, and we really had to look at some of that pretty hard. So hopefully we can inch that back up in future years. So just on the capital improvement side of things, I'm not going to go through all these, just a list of some of the major projects that we have on the agenda for next year. Cary Park, McQueen Field, the parking expansion, resurface into the downtown parking lot, water tower number 1, coating. We've got the continuation of the Main Street program from 13th down to 5th Street. We've got our water and sewer projects. Fun Valley Bleachers, we talked about that during the process. That's a big project out there. And then, of course, an assortment of water and sewer projects. And then probably the big one on there is the remodel of the LEC, the police department. And that's estimated about 2.4. Obviously, we haven't made decisions on that. There's a lot of thought process that still has to go into that. That would be a bonded project. And I think the council's been through that. We've talked about it. There's definitely a need over there. And so hopefully we can move that project forward. Utilities. Basically just wanted to kind of talk there a little bit about the projected increases. We did a rate study back in 2015-16 that really looked at our revenue coming in and recommended that we increase our rates. We hadn't increased them since 2010, 2011. And so during the 2017 budget process, the council decided we didn't really want to raise it in 2017 because at that time we were looking at a mill increase as well, and that we would revisit in 2018. And so in 2018, sewer rates went up 7%, and the plan was that they would go up 7% the next 4 years. The water went up 5.5%, and again, 5.5% over the next 4 years. And so the budget this year for 19 includes those 7% sewer rate increases and 5% on water. I don't have that information with me, but the council's seen that our water and sewer rates are very favorable when we compare to cities in Kansas. Sewer very, very low. So even with those increases, we're still on the bottom end as far as what comparable charges are. So really that just concludes my brief remarks. Certainly there are numerous other budget items that we discussed over the past 3 months, and today was really just to give a glimpse of the budget for this budget hearing. And I think the council and some of the staff that are here today would agree that the budget process this year was a lot more painful than my presentation here tonight. So, but Mayor, I'm going to turn it back over to you and the council, and you can complete the public hearing, and staff will stand for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, John. Any questions or comments of John? Okay. This is the public hearing regarding our budget for 2019. So I would invite anyone who wishes to address the council in regards to the budget to please do so at this point in time. Please step forward, Mr. Self.
Do we really know where we're going with the city? Does anybody know?
Is that rhetorical, or?
I'm just asking. Because it wasn't this way when I grew up. It's not Hutchinson. It's Wygan country. Every
I'm
place
sorry,
around
it's-
here is up for sale for
Wygan.
Wygan. You've got to start bringing people back in here for taxes. People cannot be paying, residents cannot be paying all this tax when you had all kinds of corporations around here taking care of that kind of stuff. Cessna, Consolidated Storage, Southern Extrusion. You've only got one really main, and that's Superior Boilers. They're the only ones still here, you know. Co-op, all of them, they're all gone. And that was when I grew up, that's what was going on around here. And you had all kinds of taxes in here. And everybody was taken care of. You weren't taxed out the limit right now. Since I've been here, 7 years. I came back from Texas. Came back from Texas 7 years ago. My taxes have gone up $400 on my house. And my house has not changed. You're trying to drive people out of here instead of bringing them back in here with all your taxes and your percentages and all that kind of stuff. You need to start thinking about that, guys. Thank you.
We left the mill levy at a flat rate because we didn't want to see any additional taxes. And there are how many other taxing entities? The college, the county,
It's
the rec.
important to know where the total tax dollar goes. And some people like to come and talk to one body, and we represent 25% of the dollar. School district represents 32% of it, county 25%. So it's a big, it's more than just right here.
Well, you got the sports arena that you just got through doing. Why don't you have events? There's nothing going on except basketball, or the fairgrounds.
Right.
We used to have all kinds
no
of
control
events.
over the fairgrounds.
That
Hundreds
brought
of events at
people
the
in.
fairgrounds every year. Hundreds of events. I wish Tony was here to talk about all the programming at the sports
Mechanism.
arena, but he's not here. So
Well,
Mr. Self, you
I just live right down the street from the sports arena. It looks nice. Too many hoops out in front, though. That could have been the money that you guys spent for all that. I know everything about Hart and everything. I grew up with that kind of stuff. But you could have done a solar, the watering system for all the plants that are out there in your parking lot now and everything like that. That could have been utilized that way. That way you could have had governmental assistance. You could have gotten all kinds of money for all that kind of stuff.
Right. That couldn't be utilized that way because it was earmarked for a percent for the arts. That it was an ordinance that had to be complied with.
Right.
So that money had to go towards art, and art is subjective. Of course, what one person likes is not necessarily the other.
I understand,
Yeah.
and I enjoy the art
Yeah.
throughout the town and everything like that.
Right.
But, that could have been a couple of hoops. Not.
Yeah.
There's probably not that many hoops in the Kansas in these schools. You know?
I know that there are certainly opinions about the nature of that particular art project, but to your broader questions and comments, sir, I think that we do take a number of those things into account. Now, do we take everything to the same way of thinking as yours? Maybe, maybe not. But I would really encourage you that the best time is while we're having the budget meetings. The city manager had, I think, 3 or 4 dates up there that were all public hearings, and I'd certainly we're past that point now. But I'd certainly encourage you next year and others when there are specific ideas and thoughts, and I tell you there were a lot of them through the course of things.
I went to Bueller with John.
Good.
Linda, and all
But
that.
that's what I'd certainly encourage you to be there as well. That would be a good time.
I'm tired of seeing the town go to pot.
And I think that I know that we all want Hutchinson to improve, to increase, and we are in challenging times. At the same point in time, I certainly don't believe that we've gone to pot. I think that we have many good things happening while we're still dealing with challenges.
But you drive around here, McPherson, Newton, all those places like that, their downtowns are full. Everything is full. You run down through here, that's sad.
I tend to be a cup half full person rather than a cup half empty person, and I know, as I just said, that we have challenges. And given the time, I could find you as many towns that are in more dire straits than ours is. So I know that we can compare, and I know that there are cities that are looking nicer. I would ask and encourage you and engage you to work with and see what we can do and
I'm 65.
ideas.
I've worked with so many municipalities, state, county, all that throughout Texas, Florida, all those places like that. I see what they do, and I've seen what they've done. And all those little places like that were going down the tubes, all these little towns and stuff like that. They started bringing people in because they brought the money and everything to them to bring them back in. It wasn't just, oh, that looks like a good place to go set up a business, That wasn't it.
I would posit that one of our greatest challenges is the narrative that we're going to pot. Because we do have a tremendous amount of positive initiatives going on, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with our economic development efforts through the Chamber of Commerce, but that is their sole focus, is bringing in jobs, and not just any jobs, not restaurant jobs, high wage, livable wage jobs with benefits. So we've had a few wins in the past year. Of course, those don't get nearly as much press as the negative, but we have had some losses, but we also have things in the pipeline that we're working on. When we did our strategic planning, this council, our #1 goal was to bring in more industry, and we'll do whatever we can on our side from an incentive standpoint. We're trying to look at our regulatory environment and make it easier to develop here. We've changed a lot of ordinances to make it easier to put your money here, to put your business here.
Well, the problem of it is when you do bring businesses in and everything like that, and you give them that incentive of not paying taxes for 10 years, and all of a sudden they're out of here in a year, 2 years, what happened? You lost all the tax.
We got all the benefit of the payroll that they brought in, and the equipment.
Maybe.
Millions of dollars.
And that's why they went out of business, is that they weren't bringing enough in.
Well, we'll have to respectfully disagree, because I think we've been very wise with our use of incentive dollars. And have incented those who have a good business case.
Well, again, I would encourage you, join us in 2019 as we go through the budget in greater detail.
Sure.
And come to those and would love to hear your ideas. Can we improve? Can this body improve? Certainly.
Yeah.
Have there been good things happening in this city? Certainly. Councilmember Pyros de Carvalho talked about economic development, things that are occurring. Are there continuing to be challenges? Certainly. And so together we look forward to working and improving.
But always remember, it's for the health and well-being of mankind around here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Who else? Nothing further as far as comment on the budget? All right. Is there a motion to?
I would make a motion to close the public hearing.
Thank
I'll
you.
second.
Been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes. Council, with your agreement, our approval of the budget is all the way down at the bottom almost in 8D under new business, but it seems to me to be fitting that we've been talking about the budget or considering for the last few minutes. I'd like to go ahead and move 8E up to this time for approval of the budget, if you're okay with that. Hearing no objection, then we'll move to 8E.
8D.
Excuse me, D as in David, considering the 2019 budget.
I would move to approve the 2019 budget.
Second.
Is there a second? A motion and a second to approve the 2019 budget. Is there any discussion?
I did want to just thank the dozens of people who gave input on this year's budget to me. Those phone calls, emails, Facebook messages, texts are all very helpful when we consider this. I felt like we had a little more public input this year. It was a lengthier process. It was a more painful process, but I feel like it's a solid representation of where we need to be. So thank you to all.
I'll second that, and I also want to comment. I think the staff, and it was referenced by the city manager, worked hard in regards to this year's budget, harder than I've seen, at least in the several years I've been on the council, and that was a big part of the equation as well. So yes, a difficult year, but I think a good year in terms of input, and I think challenges bring opportunity to seek solutions. Hearing nothing else, would you call roll, please, Linda?
Dave Line?
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes. All right, back to the schedule. Next item, please.
Item 6B, consider partial right-of-way vacation on Avenue G between Elm and Plum.
Evening, Jeff.
Good evening.
I think you're on, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
It's actually a public hearing, so we probably.
Do we need to, okay.
Oh, that's,
Oh,
we need
yeah,
a motion
all right.
for that.
That's why I
Okay,
was hesitating.
thank you. Thank you.
I would move to open the public hearing then.
Second. Okay.
We've got a couple of seconds, motion seconds. Any discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Sorry
Thanks for
the
keeping us on track.
Well, it was the uncomfortable silence. I didn't. So, anyway, good evening, Jeff Peterson, Interim Director of Engineering. The city had received a vacation petition from Interfaith Housing Services for the vacation of a portion of East Avenue G, the south portion of the south right-of-way from Elm Street to Plum Street, and it's shown up on the screen right there. And in order to better use the space and to make their development work a little better within the constraints of what they wanted to do on that property. So with that, we did do the normal advertising and those types of things that we needed to do, and we got comments back from utility companies as well as the city departments, and they were all positive. So we don't really have anyone against this vacation. Just a aside, East Avenue G was, when it was originally platted, was 120 feet wide, so there's quite a bit of right-of-way there. So
Okay.
vacating a portion of that isn't going to affect any of the city utilities per se,
Okay.
or the other utilities that are involved in the area. So
That's
so
a full block long, correct?
it is a full block long.
How,
Yep.
how deep is it at its widest point there on the, what is that, west?
Oh, the vacation portion?
The vacation portion,
It's
yeah.
34 feet on the one side, actually on the west side, and I don't see the one on the east side at the moment, but the measurement. But
Why is it triangular shaped?
that's just the shape. That's just the shape of the right of way as it came through there.
The streets at an
Parallel to the
angle.
street.
And
Yeah.
and the streets are skewed a little bit. There
Yeah.
used to be like a railroad
I was thinking
things
it was
running through the
railroad.
back
Oh,
area, so,
okay.
so some of that had skewed it over the years. So, but anyway. But with the the positive comments on this, it's recommended that the vacation of that's noted in the notice of, let's see, the order to vacate be approved, since we've had no one against this vacation, and it would kind of help interfaith housing as they move through their development of this property.
All right.
Any
Questions of Jeff? Any other questions?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. This is a public hearing for this matter. Is there anyone that wishes to address the council in regard to this vacation? Clint?
Jeff told me I didn't have to.
I told him you didn't have to.
Hey, Clint Nelson, Interfaith Housing. Just wanted to express appreciation for review and consideration. We've actually just been mowing this strip of land for like 6 years, so we want to own it and not mow somebody else's property. No, we're excited to move forward on the project. I think it's going to be a great addition for Lincoln and that Plum kind of Cary Park corridor, and hopefully springboard some further development in that neighborhood. So thanks for considering the request there.
Clint, can you talk to us about the
Elaborate,
project
yeah.
at all?
Yeah, we're, there was a little teaser out in the paper a long time ago, and it's taken a little bit to get to permit, but we have a local investor that came with a vision to develop some senior housing, and he was specific about the southern part of town, and we happen to own some land in that area. We actually own a disabled group home that's to the west of, on that map there, and so we had no plans to develop until the donor came to us, and now we're close to applying for a permit. So it's going to be a 16-unit senior project in quadplexes and a couple duplexes. Aesthetically, it's going to be a huge improvement for that area.
Great.
So, yeah, and they will be affordable, or we'll have some flexibility with the rents.
Okay.
And the developer obviously wouldn't put the money or that into it if he didn't see a need or a demand for it, and stuff like that.
Absolutely,
So that's
yeah.
encouraging. It'll help with the aesthetics of the neighborhood, but then also fill a need as
Yeah,
well.
certainly the donor's vision on the front end, and then we've been working together on the design side.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
What's the timeline for that?
We were supposed to break ground like 3 or 4 months ago, but I'm hoping to get permit approved and start moving dirt here before the end of the year. And then we have some pretty solid volunteer resources that we'd like to engage in this project early next year. We plan to phase it out, so we may try to put out 2 of the quadplexes in 2019, and then maybe the additional 2 a year from then.
Great. Very
Nice
good.
little project.
Good. Thank you,
Yeah.
Clint. Anyone else? Seeing none, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll move to close the public hearing.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line,
Yes?
Iris Dickert,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Inskeep,
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes.
I will move to approve the partial vacation of Avenue G between Elm Street and Plum Street as described in the notice to vacate and indicated on the site map based upon the responses from potential affected utilities and departments, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Been a motion and a second to approve the vacation. Discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line.
Yes?
Iris Dickert.
Yes.
Soldner.
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes. Thank you, Jeff. Next item, please.
Item 7A, consider ordinances amending various sections of Chapter 27 of the City Code.
This is a small item, only it'll take a minute or two, right, Amy?
I sure hope so. All right, so as they're powering up the presentation, I just wanted to say I've separated this item out, which, by the way, Amy Allison, Senior Planner, into the separate motions so you can act on them separately instead of all in one go. All right. So as mentioned, we are requesting amending the zoning regulations 4 chapters, or 4 sections to be exact. The purpose of these regulation amendments is, as you can see here, to reduce number of uses, simplify the code, reduce the number of CUPs and SUPs, or conditional use permits, special use permits, which extend timelines for development projects, implement design requirements, improve approval time, and that means reducing the approval time. And then also the infill development side, reduce barriers to development, allow denser development, promote more affordable options, and also alternative housing types that could potentially have some great impacts for some of our more older areas of town. The first section that I'll be talking about is our definitions section. The amendments to the definitions section really is just removing any language that is no longer in our code with the other changes that have happened previously this year and these changes as well. We've also removed redundant definitions. We felt one definition would suffice, not 5. So we also added any new uses that we included in the use table, as well as amending the definition for household to match the Department of Housing and Urban Development standards, so we meet federal requirements there. Other than that, I really didn't have any other things to add to the definition section unless you had questions for me specifically.
My notes necessarily didn't follow your order, so I do have one at least.
Okay.
The definition of extraterritorial jurisdiction was eliminated. Am I correct?
I believe so, yes.
Why?
I do not know the particulars of this. I think Jana was still here when that happened. I believe there is some intention to bring that back at a later date, but it would be housed underneath a different ordinance than the zoning regulations, from what I understand.
Well, part of the reason it's not in there is because we probably it's taken out because we don't have it. So that's why it's out. But Amy's correct, and that's been a conversation over the years. It's been a recent conversation. But the reason it's being taken out is because, again, we don't have that.
We haven't exercised it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
correct. We do have area of
remember
influence
the zone of
included.
influence or area of
Correct.
influence.
Area of influence.
We have
Thank you,
the
Tommy.
ability to
Comment is all.
comment,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Is that something that can be overcome with some sort of ordinance or statute, or
Yes.
Yeah.
If the county agreed.
do they have to agree? Can
No,
that be?
Don't they?
Don't we?
I think they do.
Yeah, the county plays a big role in that whole process.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We've had a conversation before, and
And they weren't interested.
they weren't interested, but that goes back,
Years.
several years. And I think if we're to open that up again, we really need to have a purpose for it and know what we're doing and why we're doing it, not just do it because we can. I think we're the only city in Reno County that doesn't have it.
Well,
Butler
that
has
was
it,
going to be my
Haven has it.
suggestion. Again, back to what Mr. Self said, where are we going with this, and shouldn't
Yeah.
we have some say in our future? And we're not going to necessarily know when a project identifies itself or
Right.
when it identifies itself. But prior to that, do we not want to recognize some area that above and beyond our area of influence that we might want to look at to incorporate into our city plan? So.
Probably a conversation that we ought to have
Yeah, I
at
think there
some
was
point.
a time where we were going to have a joint
Yeah.
meeting with the county to discuss this in further detail. And it's probably overdue
Yeah.
I would
to
agree.
pursue that.
Yeah.
But even that most recent conversation was city go ahead and do it and have the hearings and what have you. And, the thought is if we're not in this together, why go down that path? And I think we've got some ears probably over there now that
Okay.
will be able to have that conversation and
Very good.
maybe set up a meeting and just talk about it. But again, we need to be clear with our purpose and for that.
And if it were to be reintroduced, we would come
Bring that
back,
back.
And put it back in our definition section. Just currently, there is nothing that, any other section in our code that refers to an extraterritorial jurisdiction, so.
So it's unnecessary. I quite frankly, I raised it so that we'd have a little bit of discussion here. I would like for us to move through the process of the discussion with whomever it needs to be. Now, whether or not we end up seeking extraterritorial jurisdiction? I don't know. But it strikes me as certainly something that we should move on. And so, having noticed that elimination, I wanted to raise it.
Okay.
Not to suggest the way to pursue this, but would it be beneficial to initially approach and have the professional staff of the city manager's office and the planning department meet with the county professional staff and have a discussion before we would then have that discussion and open-ended with the
Right.
elected body?
I think that's appropriate, yeah. If we get the opportunity to clean up some of these other
Yeah.
things on our plate right now and planning,
No.
we've been very, very busy
Yeah, they've been
last
very, very
last
busy.
year or two.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
catch our breath on that, and we can at least initiate the conversation and
Get
talk
a-
about the process.
Get the temperature and the process.
Right.
and- mhm.
That'd be appropriate. Be happy to do that.
Okay, good. Thank you. Anything else on, let's see, we're dealing with definitions right now, correct, Amy?
Would be
That's
under
correct.
motion 1, I believe, yes.
Okay. Is there then a motion?
I move to accept and approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission to approve ordinance amending Section 27-202, definitions of Chapter 27 of the Code of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, and authorize the mayor to sign.
And is there a second?
Second.
A second. Motion and a second. Any discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line,
Yes.
Iris De Carvalho,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Inskeep,
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes.
All right, the next section is our general provisions section, but specifically addressing metal accessory structures. Currently in our code, in practice, we don't allow metal accessory structures to be built in residential districts unless it meets the character of the neighborhood. So, i.e., the house has metal on it, or there's an abundance of metal structures in that specific neighborhood. As part of the comprehensive plan process and going through what I'll later talk about in the R6 Infill implementation plan, one of the items that was proposed was to allow metal structures to be permitted, accessory structures only, not the principal structure of the property. So working through our steering committee and all of our commissions, and then the town hall meetings we've held, we've kind of narrowed that down to new painted metal structures. At the request of Councilmember Soldner, she did want to further discuss carports, and specifically during our public hearing on August 14th, this was brought up by some of the members or residents who were in attendance. And so if we want to make an exception, I would say we need to include that language now as to what type of metal structure we wouldn't permit. So a common term that we hear is a Carolina carport. I think the gentleman at that meeting called it a $675 special. Yeah. But as you can see, these are all examples of Carolina carports. I think the most common is that larger image that has radial corners. And from what I've gathered from talking with other people and what that gentleman said, other people did, they would not prefer to have this specific type of carport permitted within the city. But Carolina carport does include more than just the radial corners. Like you can see there, they have, just, the flat type of material. You have ones with siding on it. So in addition, there are other metal carports that can be built, as you can see here. There's quite a wide variety that would fall under metal carport. So I guess we just wanted to have the conversation with you guys again. Not only should we allow metal accessory structures, but should there be exceptions to that rule for our code?
So would a metal garage be allowed under what's proposed?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So back up a slide.
Sure.
Or you mean that center bottom is not a garage, since it doesn't have a front and a back or an overhead door. But put a front and a back on it, it's a garage,
It's a
and that would
garage.
be allowed.
That's correct.
And am I understanding you correctly, right now with without changing something, these would fall under allowable
Right.
accessory structures,
Mhm.
the way
Yep.
it's now written.
As we proposed it, it just says new painted metal.
I honestly don't think we're gonna have this huge outpouring of metal structures erected if we don't exclude carports.
You wanted the meeting.
Do I wanna see a bunch of metal in the city? Not necessarily, but do I wanna dictate that somebody who can't afford a wooden structure or a different structure not have the ability to put any kind of structure on their property? I'm not sure I want to go that far. What was the specific?
I think it's more
Opinion.
aesthetics
Okay.
is one aspect. Another of it is, and just to clarify, this is just allowing for metal as an approvable material. It will not change any of the building code requirements of a concrete base that'd have to be that would be required for a carport, or the affixation to the ground. It actually has to, you know,
It has to be
have a
anchored down.
foundation and
Yeah.
support system. It can't just be placed out on a property somewhere.
So to me, that almost, I mean, you've already got built-in controls for somebody just slapping something up that's,
Would this supersede restrictive covenants that are already in place?
No, those would still have to be in place, but it would be up to the neighborhood to police that.
Yeah, the city does not.
City does not have authority, I
enforce.
understand that, yes,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Okay, so they could issue the permit, but it would be up to the neighborhood.
Up to
then
the
recognize
neighborhood
the
to do
covenant.
what?
To
Police it.
police it, they would
To
be the
police it.
ones to either approve or deny or notify the neighbor if this were to be installed and it was found in violation of their codes and covenants.
That's rarely not done, isn't it?
I'm not aware of an active HOA. There might be one in Hutchinson. In some cases, we tell the applicant, especially in some of the newer neighborhoods where it potentially these HOAs are occurring, that they might want to check and see if they do have any active codes and covenants on their property, just to make sure they comply.
And do we keep the record of those codes and covenants?
No, that is at the county.
That is at the
county.
Yeah.
Forgive me, and I'm trying to define the definition between a Carolina carport and a carport. And again, the rule as it stands or as it's being presented says metal material, so it would have no exclusion for either carport type. Were you looking for input on, excuse me, there was opposition from the public with regards to Carolina carports, but not to carports?
Right, exactly.
Could you flip back to the other one again?
Sure.
Because I'm struggling to see exactly the definition or difference between the two.
I think Carolina Carports, that term, it came into being because a company named Carolina Carports manufactures them. That's just a common term I've always heard, so that's why I phrased it that way.
Sure.
But these items are probably more custom built than the ones in the previous slide.
Okay. And they're open-sided, they're roofed, things like that. Those were the triggers that I was seeing between the two.
Are they typically detached to an existing property?
Yes.
That's correct.
Yes.
To be allowed to have metal, the structure would have to be detached from the house. If it's attached, and then it's part of the principal structure, and we would say no metal at that point, because again, this is just for accessory structures detached from the principal structure.
I don't know what the difference between a regular carport and a Carolina carport would be cost prohibitive, you know, I mean, so if, I don't know, adding it or not, 6 of one, half a dozen the other with regards to, but I guess if there was was it a large contingent that didn't want the,
I mean,
Carolina
one
carport?
gentleman spoke up and there was a collective nod.
There were several.
And again, I think it is more in reference to the one, like I mentioned, that has these radial corners, not the squared off corner there that they particularly didn't like, but.
And I know some of the cases that we've had come forth with those Carolinas is not necessarily accessory building, but they want to put it out in front of the house in the driveway where they may have closed their garage off, added a bedroom or whatever, and they wanted to put one of those out in the front of the house, which is a setback issue and everything else.
Right.
So.
We specifically do not permit carports to project in the front yard, so that's not changing. They would still have to place it in their side or rear yard.
But there are carports setting just what John described.
There are.
They're generally just a roof and
Yeah.
the post
If they're
walls.
currently sitting in the city, they were,
They're not allowed
built
to.
prior to the code change, I believe in 2011. But moving forward, that's not changing.
Those would not be allowed at all,
Mm-mm.
because they cannot
Project
project
in the
beyond
front
the
yard.
front of the primary building,
Yes.
the residence.
Mhm.
Well, I just want to say that I feel like we have enough controls in place to prevent an outcropping of this type of structure. I don't like it. I wouldn't necessarily want to see it in my yard, but again, I don't know that we should prohibit the option. I'm not passionate one way or the other. I could be convinced otherwise, but I just want to be careful not to include a bunch of exclusions.
The whole purpose was to reduce regulation, so I
Yeah.
get that part. That, I guess that's probably the most important piece. Yeah, I'm with you. I guess I go either direction, but it doesn't sound like there's a strong contingency. There are measures in place. I really still can't tell the difference between a Carolina carport and the other, except for the curvature. Or like I said, maybe there's a pricing difference or something, I don't know. But they're both open-sided structures with a roof, or some are, some aren't. I don't know.
It's better than having their couple cars out in the front yard.
Yeah.
Which is also a
I don't
violation.
think you're gonna get rid of that, yeah.
Historic district, is there any impact one way or another in terms of
might
middle structures?
I will defer to Aaron Barlow, the preservation planner, on that one.
For an accessory structure like this, it would be permitted in the historic district under administrative review because it is not attached to the historic building, the structure that is historic. It's removable, so it would be acceptable if they were to find.
So it wouldn't make the property itself conforming or non-conforming, or?
No.
It'd still be conforming.
But
Yeah.
non-conforming, okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Aaron.
Did the planning commission weigh in on the Carolina piece of the puzzle?
No, not really. There was a lot of comments received that day, and we were just trying to address them as they came up.
Sure.
So no, they didn't really get into specifics of the Carolina carport debate.
I mean, I recognize that the motion's in front of us, so I know that includes
Yeah.
the metal piece, but not specific to whether they include or exclude that piece.
Okay, Amy, we're saying painted metal structures, so that means we eliminate round tops or something that is like a silver metal.
Right.
Okay.
So the neighborhood character language is still in the code, so we
Okay.
would apply that to any abnormal roof that is being proposed. If there's pitched roofs in that neighborhood, then the structure will have to have a pitched roof and
Okay.
the like. It can't,
We
be-
can't have
Right.
a curve. Okay.
Right. No
So,
hangar style.
looking at that photo on the left, would that be out of character or
I don't know if it'd be out of character
I'm
enough.
not sure what words to use, but I mean,
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, it still has sort of a pitch to it.
So the radius doesn't make it out of character. Maybe a flat, on the next slide, I think you had a single slide. Would that one on the upper right be one that might not fit to the character with that single slope?
We have permitted these style of carports even under the current code, so I don't see changing that. I think it's more of the round shaped.
More of a Quonset hut kind of thing?
Yeah. Right, yeah.
Okay.
Offhand, how many permits a year do you have or receive?
People asking to build this, quite a few. It's our number one no at the planning
Like
permit
10s,
counter.
20s, 50s?
50s plus, yeah.
Well, there's, demand then.
But I
Yeah,
do think
people-
it's key to remember that it has to have a concrete base.
Yeah.
That it's got to have a concrete floor.
Again, I think there are certain controls that we have in place that are going to prevent a bunch of structures that we deem lacking in aesthetic. But if people want to spend their money,
Do you expect an uptick
let them
of
spend their money.
permit requests?
Oh yes, we've already received numerous phone calls asking,
Really?
the specifics. If this were to pass, we might have people coming in tomorrow. I don't know, but yes.
Yeah, the biggest thing that you're going to run into are the ones who want to come out in front of a garage, a garage that's been converted, I think.
Right. And that would still not be permitted.
Right.
Well, now that I have Sweet Caroline in my head, I'm willing to make a motion. If anyone
Well, do you
wants.
have anything further on this particular
No.
element?
No, this
Okay, no.
is
Okay.
all for this section.
Jade, you ready?
Yeah.
Go for it.
I move to accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission to approve ordinance amending section 27-314, accessory buildings and uses of chapter 27 of the Code of the City of Hutchinson, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the Planning Commission's recommendation. Any discussion or any further discussion? Seeing none, Linda, call roll, please.
Dave-Line?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
All right, the next section is our zoning district section. This was probably the most heavily impacted section out of this code change. I did want to start with the R6 residential infill district. This is a district that our department has been working on since November, December timeframe. It's a brand new district we're proposing. And it was specifically designed for the older neighborhoods in town that were originally platted with 50 feet wide or less lots. So we're talking narrow, and they tend to be very deep lots. Here's the timeline again for how long we've been working on this. We started in December 2016, taking the infill study, even longer, sorry. In December 2016, the infill study created by the KU School of Architecture was brought to this body for approval. As a part of that process, they recommended looking at our regulations to see if there were any barriers in our regulations that might prohibit the redevelopment of these narrow lots that I've already mentioned. In April 2017, the city adopted the 2017-2037 Comprehensive Plan, which recommended creating an implementation plan, which was taking that infill study and looking at the regulatory barriers and coming up with a specific plan to move forward with changes. On September 2017, city staff began working on the implementation plan, and by December 2017, we actually had the policy put in place. We then took it to the various commissions, including the Land Bank Board, the Housing Commission, Planning Commission, for review and approval. The Planning Commission did see it January 2018 and recommended it to be reviewed by this body, which you did in February of 2018. At that time, kind of got the go-ahead to move forward with the actual development of regulations to create the R6 district. In April 2018, we had the district developed, and so we wanted to provide an opportunity for the community to comment. So we held 2 town hall meetings. We had over 40 people attend those 2 meetings. They were held for the Southwest and Southeast districts. May 2018, the development committee supported reducing regulations, and that's our development review committee made up of different departments within the city. And then conclusion was July 2018 was mailing the postcards advertising the public hearing on August 14th. Again, like I mentioned, we did have 2 town hall meetings. As you can see, I stand corrected, we had over 30 attendees in the Southeast and then Southwest District. We did try to find alternative ways to advertise these, so we looked to Facebook as a more cost-effective approach. We did reach over 9,000, and we tried to actively advertise to our existing neighborhood groups. College Grove, Southwest Bricktown, Lincoln were among them. And all the comments that were received at those town hall meetings were incorporated into this recommendation.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
If you go back to the other, I got to plead ignorance here. I understand the Southeast and the Southwest districts, but basically, what are those boundaries for the Southeast district in terms of how?
17th South.
17th South, a little bit past K61, and then over to Cow Creek. Is the broad-
17th South.
17th South.
Okay.
Yep.
So we'd take in pieces of northeast and northwest, wouldn't it?
Small pieces, yeah.
Yeah.
Small pieces.
Yeah,
So
which
the-
is why
so
we
the-
advertised broader, but we did
Okay.
kind of focus southeast, southwest, and so those were the major impacted areas. The R6 district has been in the news 4 times, to be exact. And then we've also had radio stations promote specifically our town hall meetings, so we appreciate all the press that we got from them. And then I just wanted to keep this up here. This was probably the #1 question we received once we started sending out postcards and letters. Will it affect my property taxes? Aaron actually did contact the county appraiser's office and confirmed that no, there is no anticipated impact to your property taxes, either increasing or reducing them with this rezone. So
Unless
you make an improvement to your property, and then,
yes.
you know.
Need to make sure people understand that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So
They
if
don't
there's an accessory dwelling unit or an accessory building,
Or add on to your house
House.
or anything like that.
Carolina
As long as it
carport.
is the
Right.
existing structure, you're fine.
Right. If you're not making any changes to your property, the rezone will not affect you. If you are taking advantage of, you know, the reduced regulations, then yes, it will most likely, you will see a bump. So.
Mhm.
Right. So to break down the R6 district, we're proposing reducing the setbacks for this residential district. The front yard would be 15 feet. The side street front yard, so if you're on a corner, it's your side yard that's adjacent to a street, would be reduced to 7.5. The side yard would be 3 feet, and the rear yard would be 10 feet. Just to note, on the front yard setback, we do have a specific requirement in place. If you are building in an established neighborhood, so on your block there's already houses there, you will have to meet the average setback of that block. So if the average setback is 20 feet, you would have to build your structure to that 20-foot setback, not the 15, just so it matches the existing neighborhood and we're not impacting them.
the rear 10 feet, that's for a primary structure?
For a primary structure.
Okay.
That's correct.
Mhm.
The lot coverage, we're proposing increasing that. Currently, the lot coverage for the R4 district, which is primarily what is being rezoned, is 45%. As you can see from that diagram there, we do have some unique lots that were, it seemed at one point, split. And so you have houses that cover a larger portion of the lot coverage and are currently non-conforming. So we're proposing increasing that to 60%. To address any of those non-conforming properties, but also to allow anybody looking to add on to their primary structure the ability to add on a little bit more square footage than what they currently can. In addition, we're proposing changing the lot size requirements in the R6. These would better reflect the original development pattern of those subdivisions. Like I mentioned, they're 30 feet wide in most cases. And 165 feet deep. So the existing, I believe, was 60 feet wide and 5,000 square feet. So currently almost all these lots are non-conforming. So we wanted to bring them back into conformance. Again, for a townhome and a two-family and multifamily, we also reduced those just to allow them more room. Since it is infill, they would have to acquire multiple lots to build this, but you know, they wouldn't have to acquire 90-foot width and 10,000 square feet to build. So,
as far as existing that would come into conformance or have a little room to expand, what any sense of percentage of existing residences that would now be out of conformance but would come into and or have room to expand if they wished?
No, we didn't really dig that deep when we were doing the analysis piece of it. But as for the lot size requirements, this specific thing, a lot of them would be brought back into conformance. Another proposal is an accessory dwelling unit. Again, this isn't just for the R6, but it was brought as part of that implementation plan. So I wanted to speak directly to this here. ADUs are accessory dwelling units, commonly known as granny flats. What they are is they're an additional living unit that can be built on your property to house an aging parent, a child that's moving back from college. It could be used as a rental property, all of that. So currently we don't allow this, but if this were to be approved, what they could build is a minimum of 400 square feet or a maximum of 960 square feet, or it cannot exceed 50% of the size of the principal dwelling, so it truly has to be smaller than the structure currently on the lot. standalone structure in the rear yard. It has to be separated from residential properties on either side by a 6-foot privacy fence, again, to try and mitigate any negative impacts that it would have on your neighbors. They would have to provide a minimum of 1 paved off-street parking space that is just specifically for that ADU. In addition, the owner would either have to reside in the principal structure or the ADU structure. This can't be a rental property where they want to add another unit. This has to be owner occupied. It has to be constructed of building materials commonly found on the principal structure. So this came up, can you use metal? This requirement would eliminate that. They could not use metal to build an accessory dwelling unit. They would have to use the same material as the house. To meet the ADU status, they have to have separate kitchen, sleeping restroom, and bathing facilities. They would have to meet all of the building code requirements, and they would also have to meet all the setback and coverage requirements as established by the zoning regulations.
Amy, did I understand this particular item, the ADU,
Mm-hmm.
it's not limited to the
R6, no.
proposed, so it's citywide?
It would be for R3, R4, and R6.
Okay.
A few months ago, we did have somebody who resides in an R3 zoning district come and request that the Planning Commission open it up to more than just the R6. So that is reflected in this proposal. But correct.
What is R3 and R4?
R4 is the residential neighborhood conservation district, and R3 is the moderate residential zoning district. So it's largely almost all the remaining areas of residential neighborhoods within the city. But, and the reason why they were requesting this was they would like to build a pool house that had the kitchen, the bathroom, and separate facilities. So under that definition, it would fall under the accessory dwelling unit. So right now he couldn't build it, but if it's permitted, the ADUs, then he would be able to build.
Maybe I'm really happy to hear that you're taking into account all of these requests. And I just think the efforts at engagement for this particular project, the infill and this has just been incredible. All the work you guys have done, the Planning Commission, the planning staff. It's just, I think, exactly what we need to see happening. So thank you for all the work you've put into it.
Thank you.
This question came to mind when I was looking through the material. And you just commented that I could not have a rental property and build an ADU in the back of that.
That's
what
right.
if I bought property that has a primary
If it's
residence
grandfathered, you can continue to use it, but no new construction would be able to.
So I could buy a rental property and they could both be rentals.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I couldn't build
Right.
onto an existing rental property.
Right.
Okay. You just mentioned the metal, and it was something else that I had down, and again, I think you've addressed it, but none of this is allowing metal siding on a residence. Am I correct?
I think in practice we have been allowing metal siding if it was metal lap siding specifically.
I guess I used the wrong term. I guess, yeah, because there is metal siding. That's
Right.
true. I guess I'm thinking of the more
Sheet metal?
commercial-looking.
If it's corrugated sheet metal,
yeah.
we do not permit that on principal structures. So in this case, we would.
The stuff that almost looks like some of the roofs that we're seeing in town now.
Right. No, that's not a permitted
As a
principal siding material. Yeah.
Okay. The metal siding then, that is common, that could be used for an ADU or as well then. I mean, the conventional metal siding, yes, no?
Metal lap siding.
Metal
yes.
lap siding, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so the next is the paving standard. This is kind of going in the direction that we went with the parking and paving recommendations that you guys have already reviewed and approved. We're proposing reducing them. So currently single-family structures have to have 2 off-street paved parking spaces when the structure is built. We're proposing reducing that to 1. Townhomes, 2-family, multifamily, again, it would be all 1 parking space per dwelling unit. In addition, accessory structures would also see some reduction in regulations. The side street front yard would be 7.5 feet, just reflecting the principle. The side yard would be 3, and the rear yard would be 3. Now, I included this diagram because we did have some concerns about, garages accessing off of the alley in that 3-foot setback. As a car is pulling out of a garage with 3 feet clearance, we don't think that that car would have enough visibility to be able to look both ways and make sure that there's no other passing vehicle behind them. So what we're saying is if you're directly accessing to the alley, meaning your garage doors face the alley, you have to have a minimum of a 10-foot setback. You can keep the 3-foot setback if you reorient your garage to come off the side there, as shown in the diagram.
Some of your older structures probably don't have that 10 feet.
Right, if it's existing.
I'm going, I don't think I have 10 feet.
If it's existing,
Yeah,
be
you're
permitted
okay.
to remain as is.
Yeah.
This would be new structures.
Yeah.
Follow up to that, to Nancy's question, would one be able to rebuild on an existing concrete pad or foundation that may not be in compliance with the
Yes,
setback?
we amended our regulations probably 2 years ago to permit that. So as long as it's within the existing footprint, you can
You're okay.
rebuild your structure.
Okay.
You can't expand it, but you can rebuild what's there. The next is existing commercial structures. We are promoting that or proposing that they be allowed to continue as long as they meet certain criteria, screening from residences, off-street parking standards, noise limitations, but also use restrictions. So we're proposing small retail and like office type uses be allowed here. As you can see there, this is a building within the city of Hutchinson. It's obviously a commercial structure. There are some other commercial structures within these neighborhoods, so we would just wanted to make sure that they would be allowed to continue to be used as they were originally developed.
Is there anything about the R6 that promotes, I guess I'll call it mom and pop kind of commercial endeavors?
I mean, I guess this would be the item that would promote it. We did just place the requirement it has to be existing commercial, not you can't build brand new. I mean, maybe further down the line if we do see, there is a want for this, we could revisit, but at least this would give them the flexibility. And then the last item for the R6 is multifamily. Currently within the R4 zoning district, to be able to build a multifamily structure, you have to apply for a conditional use permit, which is a permit that the Planning Commission has to approve, and then it comes to this body for final approval. It adds about 2 months' time onto the approval process for this type of development. Originally, we had proposed permitting it by right, but there was some pushback from the public, so we then changed it to if you are building 4 or less units, it would be permitted by right. If you're building anything more than 4 units, it would require a special use permit, which is reviewed by the Board of Zoning Appeals, and that's the final reviewing body, so it's about a 1.5-month time frame. So it would be a reduction in how much time an applicant would have to wait before they get their final approval from the planning department. They would also have to meet the specific requirements listed there: 1 space per unit, 50% of the parking must be located in the rear, trying to reduce concrete or paving in the front yard to match the existing neighborhoods. Must meet the character of the neighborhood, and then it must have a large enough lot, so it has to meet those minimum lot size requirements before we would consider it.
I'm thinking of the interfaith item that we talked about. So where would that fall given
They
this?
would have to apply for a special use permit. So if this were all to pass as is, we've kind of seen a, I guess, temporary or initial site plan, and they would meet the space, 1 parking space per unit, the 50% parking, the neighborhood of the character, all of that. They have a large enough lot. But they would just still have to proceed with the special use permit.
In this case, 16.
Right.
Does anything, do these changes impact that in a positive way, or is it a neutral impact, at least in their particular case?
I don't really see any positives. It's more of a neutral impact, except for there's probably a 2-week reduction in review time.
How much time? Okay.
Mhm.
Only one body,
Yeah, instead of everybody.
Okay. So where would it? It would be the fourplexes, right?
Fourplexes, that's correct.
Okay.
Mhm. All right. The rest of this section, did you have another question?
No.
Okay. Is the table of land uses that we have changes for. So again, just to go over the process by which we've come through this, the Planning Commission held a study session for the land use table on June 26, 2018. The Development Review Committee reviewed it January 30th, February 13th, March 13th, and April 24th of this year. We split it up so it wasn't as cumbersome to go through. We did have a steering committee for this item. It was made up of planning commissioners and then also the Chamber of Commerce. Deborah Tufel sat on it for us and she was great. So what we did, and it looks completely different than what we currently have, is we tried to reduce the number of uses that our current table has. We have over 300 uses as is. Some of them are very broad and some of them are very specific. But what we found is applicants just had a hard time trying to figure out which one that applied to them. So we're proposing increasing or broadening the use categories. So hopefully it'll be more clear which one they would fall under. But that being said, we did separate some of the more intensive or impactful uses into separate categories, and we treated them a little bit differently. In addition, we are proposing creating these things called design requirements. Our previous code didn't have codified design requirements for specific uses with the exception of about 2 or 3. And so when we went through the conditional use or special use permit process, it was really hard to place standard conditions on uses because we didn't have anything codified. Meaning, one use could have been approved with these set codes, this year, and then 5 years later, a use of the same nature could be approved with totally different conditions. So what the design requirements intend to do is codified specific requirements that would be in place. In addition, we also tried to reduce the number of CUPs and SUPs that would be required to be able to have a use go onto a lot. And the replacement is these design requirements. So what we're saying is if you meet all the design requirements, we'll approve your occupancy permit at the counter. You won't have to go before the Planning Commission or City Council for approval. Again, reducing the timing of their approval process. In addition, we also obviously changed the layout. We had P and dashes pretty much in our existing table. Some people really didn't understand what the dash meant, so we tried to clarify that for them. N is not permitted, P is permitted, D is permitted with design requirements, S is a special use permit, C is conditional use permit, and H is a home occupation. That currently we didn't have in our code, but we're trying to introduce it so people know specifically what they can have as home occupation, what they can't.
I'm reviewing or looking at the zoning districts, and in particular interested in knowing if you made any modifications to the industrial districts of I-1 or I-2 or I-3. Did you modify any of the types of businesses that could locate within those 3 districts?
We tried to open it up to more types of businesses that could go in there and do a little bit more crossover of commercial type uses and heavier industrial. But heavy industrial that didn't have as much of an impact as others did. And again, broadening those categories, I think what you'll see is more specific ones that were listed in the old table as only permitted in the I-3 would now be permitted in the I-1 and I-2
in the I-1 and
because
I-2.
of the broad categories, yeah.
Can you give me an example?
Can you think
maybe
of
or
one?
maybe not.
Sorry,
Okay.
there's so many of them.
There are so many of them. I understand that. So.
Let me see if I had it on the slide. No, I didn't.
That's fine, yeah.
Just to follow this, so there will be usages or allowed in I-1 and I-2 that had not been allowed previously in I-1 and I-2, is that correct?
I think there are a few, yes.
Okay. Is that a good thing?
I think what we try to accomplish is to mitigate any of those negative impacts through the design requirements. So right now, it probably has a D that says it's permitted as long as you meet these specific design requirements.
Aaron's got something for you,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, sure.
I guess one example right here, textile mills. Creating textiles requires a conditional use permit in the I-2. It's permitted in the I-3. However, it's not very specific on the scale of that textile mill. Are we talking like full-blown shirt manufacturing, or is it an artisanal style of textile where, you know, someone from Peru would come in and textile or put together their own sort of carpets or something? What we did instead is we separate them by the scale of these. So there's artisanal, light, medium, and heavy. And so an artisanal can even be allowed in some commercial districts because it's so small. Now you get to heavy, it's going to be allowed in only maybe I-2 and I-3. Yes, and I-3, but maybe I-2. And then the mediums and the smalls, you know, gives that grading scale. Instead of saying what you can do, it's the scale and the intensiveness of that type of manufacturing.
Right.
Well, that makes sense.
I noticed here, again, kind of shifting gears here a little bit on the A1 Airport Industrial Mixed Use District. I believe that's a new district that we have created.
It's a newer district, yeah.
In the material we received, I think we referenced light manufacturing could or would be allowed within our airport.
That's correct.
What do we mean by light manufacturing?
Again,
is
it
there a
would
definition there?
Based off the size, and it's in the definitions section.
In other words, would let's take as an example, Lowen Corporation, and they built that new facility out 11th and Airport Road. Would they have been allowed to locate on the airport property?
Or would they now?
Would they now, right?
John, you're making them work.
I know.
Well, this airport thing has got some real, to me, it's got some real long-term opportunities here for some development that previously we have not had those opportunities with the FAA restrictions. And hopefully over time, we can look at some opportunities in terms of the development of some of that property.
Right. Light manufacture with the new definition says shall mean the manufacture of non-hazardous and non-explosive materials that do not require or include outdoor storage of materials, supplies, and goods, in which manufacturing processes are conducted entirely within a fully enclosed building. This definition does not include artisanal manufacturing.
That was light.
That's light.
That's light, okay.
And that would be allowed?
That would be allowed
That
in
would be allowed.
AI.
Okay.
The biggest difference looking at it seems to be that outdoor storage
Right.
versus everything is contained,
Right.
self-contained.
And then non-hazardous, non-explosive
yeah.
materials.
And that's
Yeah.
appropriate, certainly. Yes, right. So-
Yeah. Okay. Scroll back.
Any more questions about the
Sorry
table?
about that.
Oh,
but
you're
just
fine.
Want a clarification there.
No, okay. Just kind of going through some of the other uses that we're proposing for residential, obviously accessory dwelling units, compact development or economy homes. Some people want to call these the tiny house movement. So general, the same size, but it would still have to, you know, sit on a permanent foundation and meet building code requirements, but just giving them the option to make a house that is smaller than 600 square feet within the city. Another one is a cottage court development, which a good example of that is the townhomes at Santa Fe Place project. It kind of faced towards an interior corridor or courtyard. And then also a live-work unit, which again goes to more of that mixed-use ability, not necessarily small mom pop, you know, a standalone commercial, but an artist wanting to have their shop out of their house is a good example.
I keep, again, is this an R6 only, or is this a citywide?
I think it's R6 and potentially R4. Yeah, some commercial as well. Oh, no, I'm sorry, I was incorrect. Live work is not permitted in the R6, but it would be in the C3, C4, and C5, as well as CR and EN districts.
And the compact development, tiny houses?
Mm-hmm. That would be R6 MHMP, which is our manufactured home zoning districts.
And here again, it's important that it has to be anchored on a foundation.
Absolutely.
It does not travel.
All right. Commercial uses, I don't think we proposed any specific new use. We just consolidated a lot of them into broader categories. I did want you to know that drive-throughs would now be permitted with the design requirements instead of having to go through a special use permit process like it has to currently. So the next time a bank wants to open up a drive-through lane, they wouldn't have to get a special use permit. They would just have to meet the design requirements that have been codified.
Very good.
Did you reduce the stacking?
We did.
Okay.
Yes.
Thought you did.
For industrial uses, and again, Nancy, that was part of the paving parking amendments that you guys have already approved. Industrial uses, again, just consolidated, but just wanted to note that this was a strategy in the comp plan, are not allowing for oil or natural gas mining within the city. That extraction would not be permitted.
So I can't put an oil well in my backyard. Shoot.
That's right.
It's too bad.
Isn't it?
All the places down in Texas.
I know.
Really? No taxes.
Yeah.
All right. So we are proposing some changes to the zoning districts. We removed some of the extra references in those sections that just didn't make sense. We're also proposing removing the adult entertainment district. Due to some Supreme Court decisions that have been made pertaining to these types of uses. We're still keeping the separation requirements that are currently codified, but they will have to go through a conditional use process within the C4 district. We did have a planning tech map based off of those separation requirements, any usable spaces, and I think it's still the same, only two areas would be able to accommodate it, but we have to make sure we don't place too strenuous of a requirement on these types of uses, or else we might be in violation of Supreme Court rulings. So, in addition, we added the R6 zoning district. Another item that was added, and at the request of Nancy, was the landfill. And just to clarify, we originally had landfill under the mining extraction use, but after reviewing it, we felt that wasn't right. We needed to separate it out. We did keep the same permit process requirements across it, which is a conditional use permit in all the zoning districts. She did want us to question and see if we should just revert back to the existing code, which is only in the I3 district. I don't think staff has any concerns if that's what you would like to choose, but you would have to amend the ordinance to do that.
It just made no sense to have a landfill in a residential neighborhood, but
Well, yeah. So what changes are you making? Or if any?
Right. Currently, landfills would be permitted in all zoning districts with a conditional use permit. That's the current standard is only a CUP in the I3. So if you want to move back to what the existing code is and not the proposed, we would need to amend that specific item.
And the Planning Commission signed off on the allowance in any district with a special
conditional use permit.
Conditional use permit.
CUP.
I don't think it terribly logical that that's going to happen, but, we might think about it down the road, amending it.
it doesn't make sense to me to think about having a landfill in a residential district.
No.
And I think you made a good point, Nancy. I suggest we whatever.
Go back
if
to
we
the
just
old
do
firm.
that at this point as well. At least that'd be my suggestion,
Yeah.
but that's
I'm
interesting.
not sure we have the verbiage here to do it. You know, it may be something that has to go ahead and do what we're doing now and then come back and amend it when we have the language. I don't know, Paul.
We can amend anything.
Okay. Anytime. Okay.
I think there's also some other practical limitations about where a landfill is going to be placed.
Right. Yeah, I
And
know.
it's not just the city of Hutchinson.
No.
Try KDHE and EPA, okay?
Yeah, they're going to take care of it.
There are some design requirements that go along with the landfill, so it would probably eliminate any residential or even commercial zoning districts, but if you wanted to remove any doubt, you'd go back to the old way.
Well, I don't. If we could do it now, I would just as well do it now.
I'm with you on that.
And if for some reason we've got to get some dotted I's and crossed T's language together before doing it, then hold off. But I think we ought to go back to allowing it only in I3, whether or not there are design requirements. It just seems ludicrous to even have it on the books that you could conceivably do it in a residential district. So I would like to do it tonight when we're doing this other stuff, if we can.
Okay, let's see how to phrase it. Which motion is this actually under?
I think
Is
we're
this
on
under
three,
This is
right?
a third
We're
motion,
still on
yes.
three.
Under three?
Mhm. And this is the end of that section, so.
Okay, so if we want to do this, what we can say, can I go ahead and do a motion and try to get that plugged in? Steve?
It's fine by me.
Okay, let's try this. Move to accept and approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission to approve ordinance amending Article 4 zoning districts of Chapter 27 of the Code of the City of Hutchinson, with the exception of
A little slower,
landfill.
please.
What?
A little
Slower.
bit
Oh,
slower
okay,
so I
the
can catch it.
regular motion until we
Right,
get
with
to.
the exception.
With the exception of landfill, and restrict it only to, what did we say, I3?
I3, heavy industrial.
Right, removing all other uses, all other conditional use permit uses. Does that sort of make sense?
Sounds pretty good.
Okay.
Second. We're there.
I guess were you finished with your presentation?
Yeah, for this section I am.
That's
Yeah.
This was the last item.
Yeah,
okay.
this
Yeah,
was it.
there's one more section to go, but
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Okay,
understand.
so we
Okay,
need
so
to
this is
vote-
the motion for the whole
for this,
thing,
to get rid of the landfill option.
and it
Yeah.
takes care of the landfill part.
Okay.
For motion 3.
And I think
Moved and
you
seconded.
seconded
Yeah,
it.
Dave
Okay.
seconded.
All right, motion is, any further discussion having to do with this whole section that Amy's been presenting to us over the last bit? Hearing none. Call roll, please.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes. How much more do you have?
this is the last one for this
Fairly
item.
quick?
Yes, absolutely. It's the
Let's do
quickest.
it.
If she has anything to say about it.
Supplemental regulations. Again, I talked about those specific uses that had design requirements that are codified. That is the salvage yard and the self-service storage yards. We have put those in the design requirements. So we would like you to repeal these two sections in the supplemental regulations because they have been moved to the previous section. And that's it.
That's simple, huh?
Mm-hmm.
That was fast.
Yes.
That was your
Yeah.
1 minute.
Yep.
Is there a motion
Well,
or
I move
discussion?
to, let's see, accept the recommendations of the Planning Commission to approve ordinance amending certain sections of Article 9 Supplemental Regulations of Chapter 27 of the Code of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, and authorize the mayor to sign.
And
Second.
Second, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line?
Yes?
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
one last thing. The R6 will be going for a rezone. The actual rezoning of the property is August 28th, and you'll see it back if it's approved September 18th. So.
Okay. And Amy, I do want to say the amount of work that you all have put in on this is incredible. And thank you very much for the simplification, especially with the land use section.
Oh, absolutely.
That was huge.
Honestly, Jana McCarran did probably most of this work, easily 95% of it. So thank you.
But you all
You were on staff when that was occurring, so I know you did your part.
Yeah, it's on your clock, huh?
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the R6, but the R6 was certainly big. And there's, John
Yeah,
made a reference earlier in this evening's meeting. There's been a tremendous amount happening in the planning department.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly Jana had a lot to do with it, but she wasn't a one-woman department.
Right.
And there were you and Aaron and Jade and other staff that were involved in this. So it's been an extremely, I think, good and productive year. And this is just another one of those pretty significant pieces that you guys have done a great job on.
Yeah.
And that simplification should swing both ways, not only for the person who's applying, but then for staff as well to approve, disapprove, whatever it is,
Let's take about 7-minute break. 7:10 or 7:11. Let's go to about 7:17, 7:18, and we'll reconvene at that time.
We need an hourglass, like a 10-minute hourglass, and we turn it over.
A, consider conditional use permit for a salvage yard located at 316 Spencer Street.
Hi again.
Oh, it's good to see you back, Amy. Been a while.
Amy Allison, Senior Planner. Again, I'll try and make this short. Okay, so we have a request for a salvage yard use at 316 Spencer Street. The applicant is Edwin Manchi, who is also the property owner, and he is in attendance today. The property in question is outlined in red on this map. The current zoning is I2, which is our medium industrial district. The comprehensive plan land use designation is industrial, so that is in meeting with this use. The applicant did have to get a variance from one of the requirements, which was 300-foot separation between the proposed boundaries of the use and any residential zoning district. You can see here's a map. The separation is 275 feet. The Board of Zoning Appeals did consider this item on August 14th and approved the variance. So he now has the variance to move forward with the conditional use permit. Here is a map showing their proposed ADA parking space. The rest of the parking they are proposing to have indoors in those 2 garage doors you see there. They meet the parking requirements for this use. In addition, here's their site plan. They aren't proposing building any new buildings, but one of the requirements is they have to screen their yard from public view. So this site plan kind of shows the area in which they're screening, which is up there in that top left corner, or sorry, top right corner and bottom left corner. They are proposing a 6-foot privacy fence to meet that screening requirement. Here's some photographs of the property. This is looking east into the property. Again, that's
Amy, relating to your screen that just come, any of this chain link or
right,
whatever it might
replaced.
be, that would be a solid fencing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Again, another view of the property. This is looking south as part of the neighborhood. Here is an image looking east into the property from the east side of the lot. And again, this is that little concrete pad is where the ADA space will be going. And again, any chain link fence you see will be replaced with a privacy fence.
Do you have a picture of the south? Maybe I missed it. The south side of the property.
It was hard to get. We didn't get it when we went out early.
That's an old picture, isn't it?
It is a little bit older picture.
Reason I raised the question: there's a lot of volunteer tree growth along that south line.
Yeah.
Currently, not in that picture.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's a question to ask of the property owner, but I would hope that's all going to be removed.
Yeah, and that would be something that he would probably
Okay.
be better answered by him. So here are the factors to be considered by the council for this conditional use permit. Again, these factors were also considered by the Planning Commission. They found that they were met by the proposal presented by the applicant. They did have these recommendations or conditions of approval that was also put in your staff report. Very quickly, just the requirements for salvage use that are codified in our ordinance. They did recommend approval of the CUP for your consideration, and that's the end of my presentation. So,
Back to one of your earlier slides. There's got to be, let's see, what was it? 300 feet separation to a residentially zoned area.
right,
Not necessarily to residences.
not to the use, but to the zoning district.
Because there are residences directly across the alley to the south,
Right.
correct?
Yes, but they are zoned industrial.
Okay. Help me understand, even through our comprehensive planning and whatnot, how we ended up keeping an area like this industrial zoned.
I really can't speak to this specific area. I mean, we're talking about a large city, and we tried to address as many of the areas that we knew had different zoning to what the actual use was, but it would have been very hard for staff to address all of them within that last comprehensive plan zoning map change. So
It doesn't fall within the purview tonight, but it just seems to me maybe this is an area that we ought to take a look at. Is I the correct zoning for the corner of 4th and Lorraine and going west a little bit? And I think that is roughly I think one of our materials have the overlay zoning. And then maybe it's not a concern to other council members, but it just, yeah, the gray is industrial, am I correct?
That's correct.
The lots that have the houses on them actually really fit that EN zone as well as anything, because it was designed to
Have a
pick up,
mixture of uses.
yeah, and to pick up these things, because if a house is in an industrial zone and something happens to it, they can't rebuild it.
Right. Rebuild it, right.
But if we change just that little house, whatever, I don't know how many houses there are there, a couple?
5 it looks like.
Yeah.
5, okay, I mean, if we change spot zoning, but if you change that just strictly to an EN,
Right.
then they would be safe, I guess is the best way to put it.
As for the requirement of the 30-foot separation, the EN wouldn't trigger that either because
Yeah.
it's not a residential district.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It would be better for the longevity of a house.
Yeah,
at
well,
the
for
lot.
those homeowners, it would be better. So, anyway.
Any other questions?
Salvage yards, by their nature, I believe, tend to attract collection of vegetation and spaces and whatnot. Again, we've got across the alley folks living there, and of course we've got businesses around there. Is there anything in the restrictions in terms of vermin, pests, mosquitoes, etc.?
I believe that would be addressed through the International Property Maintenance Code if there was an abundance of vegetation that occurred in the alleyway. The goal of the screening fence is to, contain as much of that into the lot and not have it expand onto other neighboring lots. As for that's in our code, no, there's really nothing that specifically addresses that issue.
Steve, you might want to ask Mr. Manchi to talk about his plans, because I was at the Planning Commission when this was brought up, and it's not a salvage yard in the context that we think of salvage yards.
Would you be willing to?
Yeah, what?
Yeah, why don't you
Mr.
come
Manchi?
explain, because I was kind of going, huh, but then when you explained it, it made much more sense.
Hey, I'm Ed Manchi, I own Sodus Enterprises.
Yeah.
The reason that was zoned industrial was because we had Cook Manufacturing, which manufactured a lot of steel items back in the day. And there was a lot of manufacturing plants
Right
in
there.
that area, so they've since been, gone. But I don't understand, I kind of understand, but I don't understand why I have to go like with a salvage license. It's just or a salvage yard. It's not what I'm wanting to put there. What we do is we supply cars to, well, like today, the college for the fire department called and asked if they need 20 cars delivered out there. Okay, where I'm currently at on 11th Street and on 1st and in Salvage, we are full of cars. We have no space at all. So we work with the city, we work with all the departments in the city really close, and we will pick up a car that's, well, Interfaith House, or I guess it was New Beginnings, had me pick up a couple vehicles that was on their property. Okay, legally, I have to take these vehicles and put them in an impound yard for 30 days and notify the owners and go through the process of advertising and stuff to give the proper owners and the people that have liens on them time to get them. But my other yard is so full that I cannot have these cars there, and the city is really picking up a lot of cars right now, out there. They're enforcing the code against cars being abandoned and stuff like that.
So this would be a storage yard?
It's
if
really
anything.
More like McCurdy's and
yeah, it's more like an
Plums
impound.
and stuff like that. This is not going to be, we're not going to retail parts.
Yeah,
We're not
it's
going to
an
sell
impound.
parts there. We're not going to stack cars there. It's going to be a place where we can take cars and put them there until we have the proper title work and the paperwork. And then they'll be taken to my recycle facility.
If you want to crush them, you take them over there. If you want part of them, you take them over there. Or
Right.
But this is purely for storage, it sounds like.
Yeah, there's really no way we could bring heavy equipment into this facility
Right.
and do what we do at our other yards. And it's like with the fire department, we'll bring a car in, we have to remove the gas, we have to do all that for the EPA laws and do all, do everything proper. Then we can take the car out to East 4th Street. Whereas if we take it out to my yard, once again, we're out of rooms, so we gotta, we're just looking at a place that we can bring cars in temporary, rotate them. And I really seriously doubt if there'll ever be over, 30 cars there at the most. And we are gonna screen the front, and we're gonna screen the sides and everything like that, so. And there are lights, and we have put overhead lights there, and we're putting in cameras there. So, it's going to help on the security of the neighborhood too. And that's really what I'm wanting to do. The way it's worded, I have to have a salvage yard permit. I guess that's the way it is. But
I see.
that's not what we want to put in. And,
Is there no closer, I'm talking to the gallery now, sorry, closer, more appropriate description, use? There is not. Okay, and that's why we fell under the header of
Right.
salvage. Okay.
Sorry, to interject, the reason why it's under the salvage yard use is our definition is pretty clear. If there are 2 or more unlicensed or non-working vehicles.
Inoperable.
Inoperable, then there is a salvage use.
Okay.
And we're not going to dismount cars there. And
Yeah.
stuff like that. It's just going to be bringing them in and then moving them on out.
Waiting for 30 days, whatever the appropriate amount of time is.
Yeah, we have to keep them 30 days and advertise them and go through to
Yeah.
notify the current owners
Sure.
if they're
Give them an
possible.
opportunity.
And then you mentioned the trees along there. We're taking all the brush and stuff. That's all coming out, and we're putting a privacy fence in there to clean it up.
What sort of interior maintenance will you be doing? Just in terms of operating it?
Right now, it's.
And I said maintenance, I don't really mean the buildings, the grounds.
Yeah, it's a real heavy rock now that currently was a lumber yard.
Mm-hmm.
And they had heavy trucks in there and stuff, and they packed it down pretty good. So I don't want no grass in there at all. I don't want no, weeds growing in there. And we do pay for that, the rainwater runoff.
Stormwater fee.
If that ground in that area takes the water in, then we shouldn't be paying that but they say it runs off, so, there is that. But that's what I'm asking for, is just enough space to process my cars so we can move them on.
That's a lot different than what I originally pictured.
Yeah. Well, and I would have thought the same thing, except I was at the meeting the other night when he spoke, and it became very clear that it's not what we can conceptualize as a salvage yard.
And I'd be more than willing to have inspections if the city wants to come out and inspect. I mean, we're just.
Yeah, they'll do the appropriate.
I work with the city a lot. We get along, and so I try to do what they want.
There was some conditional use conditions, and you're aware of those conditions and willing to meet those conditions? Okay.
Yeah, I worked with the city down there, and we talked about them and worked them all out. And
Perfect.
everything.
Amy, a question for you. Since this is a salvage yard, by definition, what's if his business plan changes, can he make it a more conventional salvage yard with this action?
Conditional use permit, yes.
That's where I understand what you're saying on that, but, earlier you was talking about the houses, if a person had lived in a house and they built a rental house behind them, if the homeowner lived in the house, he could build the rental back there. What would stop a guy from moving into the house, being the homeowner, build a house behind it, then move right back out and use them both for rentals? Anything like that does happen, but I'm just telling you that is not going to happen there. I have 4 salvage yards that I own. I have, I'm not going to turn another one in there.
I personally put a lot of weight on the various groups, and I saw that 17 different possibly affected property owners were notified. They had no public comment. Planning reviewed it, and upon staff's recommendation of approval, voted unanimously to do so as well. So those are three things that I would say I'm considering when I'm making my decision, and I'm leaning towards the acceptance and approval of it.
Well said.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll stand to hear if anybody has something to tell me differently.
It's just a concern that I've got. You're right. I don't disagree with you, David. You make good points. Mr. Mancy, we've visited with you before.
Mm-hmm. And you guys are always.
But we take an action, and down the road there can certainly be some things occur, whether you're the owner or somebody else is the owner then of that particular piece of property, and it just concerns me. And what zoning allows salvage yard? Only I3
and I2.
I3 and I2. Okay. I'm questioned out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'd be willing myself to make a motion to accept and approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission to approve the conditional use permit for a salvage yard to be located at 316 Spencer Street pursuant to the factors and conditions listed.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to approve. Is there any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes. I would like, I'd make a request, John. I'd really like to look at that again, going to that map with the gray. An I2 zoning just doesn't fit for me, and it's gone off. But if that's something we can take a look at, I'd sure appreciate it.
You mean after all this is?
After all this, yeah.
The whole city has that problem.
Yeah.
Some areas, yeah.
Well, and maybe there's more areas. I know this one, and
Be something we can look at.
It just concerns me having I2 zoning in that sort of an area.
Is there a way to put, and I know we put a lot of load and pressure on you, but is there a way to put a graphic together that shows the little lot, the industrial pockets that appear to be out of place? And maybe we have that information in some old material. I just don't have it in front of me.
It would be something we'd have to look into to see if we do have all the information we would need in GIS to be able to perform that analysis. But it might take some time.
Okay.
Just with current workload.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Streets a mess.
Next item, please.
Item 8B, consider airport T-hanger manufacturer bid award.
This one you think you're done.
We're trying.
Good evening. Peter Miller, your friendly Hutchinson Airport manager, keeper of the runways. Like most of my little talks up here, this will be pretty quick. If I've learned anything, it's I need to get my memos to Linda before zoning does.
You do tend to end at the come at the end of the.
Oh boy.
I do, and this is a real simple one too. So
It's got to be an ordinance.
last time I was up here, we were talking about the bond issuance for the T-hanger project that we're building out at the airport. At the same time, we had T-hanger manufacture and delivery out to bid. Shortly after that council meeting, we opened up the bids, and so this is just for award of the bid to Erectitube Incorporated to supply us delivered 8 T-hangers for our construction project out at the airport. Kind of a quick note on this, actually, Erectitube was not the low bid. There were two different companies bid on this, Full Fab and Erectitube. Full Fab was the low bid by about $20,000, $22,000. However, upon reviewing their bid, they didn't meet the specifications. I was very specific in the size of the clear space opening for the hangar doors that we wanted, because I wanted to be able to rent those hangars to 90% of the tenants that we have on the airport, so I needed 44 feet. This is, I mean, it literally came down to inches. Their clear space was 43 foot 8 inches, and Erectitube was straight at 44. And so we verified those numbers and then notified them that we had to reject their bid. So basically, this is just part one of the two-part T-hanger project. This is simply for the manufacture and delivery of these 8 T-hangers. Once this is approved, we're going to move forward with the site preparation and the concrete work, and then whenever the steel shows up, we'll have somebody bolt it together for us. So.
Okay.
Does the remaining funding, I think we've got 300,000, am I right?
370.
370.
Yep.
You feel it's going to be, so that's 115, no, 215, sufficient for the site prep?
Yes,
assembly?
I think so. I think we'll
You're in good shape?
Pretty good shape, yep.
Further questions? Motion?
I would move to accept the bid from Erectitube Inc. for manufacture and delivery of 8 metal T-hangers for an amount not to exceed $155,945 for the Hutchinson Regional Airport, and authorize the mayor to sign any necessary documents.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Call roll, please.
Daveline?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Item 8C, consider Orchard Park Pavilion bids.
Save the best for last, right?
You bet.
Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. This item is for the bids for the Park Pavilion at Orchard Park. However, I do want to just take a step back just quickly and go over the phasing of the project, of the development of Orchard Park, something I haven't done in the last couple of years. I've been asked before about where the park has been, what the phasing looks like. So here is a very short background of Riverbank Orchard Park. So the project actually started way back in 2011 when a master plan was developed for the park. I brought it. It's 121 pages. I scanned every image. So I'll go over that one by one.
Yeah.
Developing that plan, there were 10 information gathering meetings. 3 of those were open to the public. 7 were geared at specific stakeholder groups, Dillon Nature Center, Tree Board, those sorts of groups. We're all engaged to come up with the master plan. Some of the highlights from the master plan, things that were considered primary amenities based on the input of the community, with a walking trail, an inclusive playground, a rental pavilion, open space, practice fields, drainage areas, and a fishing pond. There's also some secondary amenities. So these were things that came up less frequently in the conversations with the community, things that came up less frequently in the survey that was done as part of this process. So as far as the phasing goes, phase 1 was completed in 2014. That was the playground, the restroom, a portion of a parking lot, and some of the basic site utilities. 2015 then, phase 2, was an extension of the parking lot, some landscaping, the drainage work, the beginning of the park road that we extended later on, and then also again more utility, underground utility work. Phase 3, which is really kind of where the park started to take more shape, was done in 2016. So that's when the road was extended down to the pond, and we created the loop around the pond, or near the pond. We also did the pond patio, and then again continued to expand and extend those utilities towards the south end of the park. Phase 3B, so if you notice that was 3A. Some of these phases, there's five numbers, but some of them are broken up into A and B. So phase 3B was done in 2017. It was in the 2016 budget, but it was completed in 2017. That created the open space kind of practice fields, the nice irrigated turf that we have today, the disc golf course, some improvements to the pond, which was a 4-bay, basically a sedimentation pond, to help and prevent the pond from filling with sediment as quickly, as well as we developed the outer trail loop and as a rock walking trail. So those were completed in 2017. So phase 4, which it brings us up to today, then was bonded in the fall of 2017. It was in the 2017 budget. And also, it's been a couple years ago, in 2016, when we were having the conversations about the CIP for 2017, my initial request was simply for 4A. 4A was really the parking and site work for the building, and then 4B would come the following year, was the actual completion of the building itself. Through the budget discussion, it was agreed that if we're committing to the parking lot, we're also committing to the building. So back in 16, we did combine those two phases, 4A and 4B, into the 2017 budget. And again, those were bonded late 2017. So that is a 3D rendering of the building that is designed, 4,000 square feet approximately. There is a main room, which is about 2,100 square feet. To put that in perspective, if you're familiar with home builders or Rice Community Park building, those buildings are right at 2,100 square feet. They're actually the exact same size. So you could fit those buildings into kind of the main room. So it's a much larger building than what we have currently. But the overall square footage of the building is 4,000 square feet. There's a small kitchen. We've been to Dillon Nature Center. They have a small kitchen with a roll-up window that has a sink and some outlets. We're not talking any cooking equipment, anything like that. Really just someplace you could serve food through a window. Restrooms, as well as just a small conference room, meeting room, storage room. So that's the footprint of the building. So bid results. I'm sure everybody saw the memo. The numbers are pretty staggering. We had 7 vendors or seven construction companies that responded. Bids were very competitive as far as separation between the bidders. As you notice, there were a whole bunch of alternate items on there. I'll get to kind of why we did that. Base bid was basically the structure. No heating, no HVAC, no plumbing, no electrical. Item 2, or alternate 1, was above ground plumbing. Alternate 2 was for all electrical work. Alternate 3 was for HVAC and mechanical systems. The reason we broke those 3 out specifically, those are trades that we could do in-house with park employees. We have master electrician, master plumber. So there were concerns with the budget going into this, so we broke those out thinking if we absolutely had to, we could pull one of those trades out and self-perform that work. So then that brings us to alternate 4, which is really creation of an expanded patio. Alternate 6 was for some additional parking. The base bid did have some ADA parking and a few other things, a few stalls. The alternate 5 was for additional parking, more convenience parking than anything else. Alternate 6, or item number 7, then was for the decorative retaining wall and some additional decorative paving. The reason those were separated out as deduct alternates were items 5, 6, and 7. If we didn't award those, but we were able to award everything else, the building would still be operational. We could still use the building. So that's kind of the division between the alternates and why we had so many, and the logic behind the way they're divided out. So low bid was Bott's Construction out of Newton, $1.5 million. Architect's estimate going into it was 1.1. Our budget was 800,000. So obviously there was a disconnect there. Again, going back to the alternates, we knew some of those alternates were high price items. Based on the architect's estimate of 1.1, we felt like we could award 2 or 3 alternates, reject the rest of them, and still meet our budget. Apparently, the architect missed. Sometimes it happens. You know, he $400,000 when we're already over budget really puts the project out of reach. You know, for what we have budgeted, the base bid was 1.1 just to get the building. So there's really no, with the available funds, you know, we really can't construct the building we've designed. So so the recommendation is to reject all the bids. Now, last Friday, John and I did meet with the architect and had a very productive meeting about opportunities to reduce the cost of the building, reduce maybe the overall height. If you remember, it was a 2-story building, so we could bring it down, reduce some of the glass, reduce some of the finer finishes of the building, and get it down to within budget. So,
And within budget is?
800,000 construction. Yeah, we bonded 883, but after we had design cost, geotechnical reports, those sorts of things, our construction dollars were about 800,000. So, I was very, very happy with our meeting with Kelly. I mean, he took a lot of ownership in it, took responsibility for it. He missed. He was thinking 1.1 for the total, and we could take some alternates and get it down closer or close to the 800. But unfortunately, that's not how the bids came in. So at this point, the recommendation really is just to kind of reject everything, and then possibly start again with taking the building we have and trying to bring the cost down. Value engineering is kind of a word we use, but that would be so significant that we don't think we could negotiate with VOTS to get that down. That'd be unfair to all the other contractors. So.
Is it substantial increase in price of materials, or was it just he missed the total?
There were several big ticket items that I think either material cost or labor cost he was inaccurate. The three things that were really driving the cost of this building is the glass. They're nice. Go back to the. It's not a great picture there, but there are glass all the way on either side of the building. The front has quite a bit, and then you see the upper story windows, and those were all pretty decorative. With wood inlays and things. The roof, we went with the standing seam metal roof for durability. That was driving the cost up, as well as on the interior of the building. There was some exposed pre-lam beams and structure. Those were also more than what he projected cost-wise. We knew those were going to be expensive, and so when you miss on 3 or 4 big items, that's how they kind of all accumulate to, the $400,000 or more overage. So, like I said, he was very responsive to the meeting. I mean, I think he understood the position we were in, and he's confident we can get it back to where we need to be. So.
But the building would look a lot different than what we see here.
It would. So one of the recommendations he had was to lower the overall height. So we've got kind of a 2-tier roof line, so that would all come down to be basically a single level roof. And then the patio that extends out, so you can see all the cedar columns, all those would go away. So the overhang would reduce from, I believe, 10 feet to 2 or 3 feet. And then we're eliminating all those exterior posts. And then the limestone veneer at the base. That would significantly reduce the amount of roof, and then all those upper level windows would be reduced. So that alone is he hadn't put a number to it yet. He just wanted to kind of see where we were at, see what direction to go. So he came to the table with 3 or 4 really good ideas, just brainstorming with his partners in the office.
Okay. So John, we reject these bids. The money that we bonded for this project, we just hold it back for future use or for another project, or?
We would have to, there's a couple options. We'd have to we'd talk with bond counsel, but one possibility, which isn't what we would want to do, is simply deposit that in bond and interest and pay interest on money that we didn't really do anything with. So that's really not a good option. The other option.
What would that expense be, though? I want to get a dollar amount in my head. What's the cost for doing that?
The interest over the 20 years, I don't remember. I mean, it's excess of 100, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, and that's what I was looking for. If
I mean,
we're talking $7,000.
No, it's a lot of money.
And that'd be in addition to the design fees and
we've already spent
close to $100,000. So that'd be in addition to.
So we'd basically be throwing away $200,000 if we put that money in. I mean, over the course of 20 years.
Potentially, yeah. Now, the other option might be that we could redirect those bond funds to future projects that we just showed tonight, CIP projects that we've planned to bond next year. I think we'd have to go through, we want some time to research that, but we'd have to just, you know, through resolution ordinance, re-identify the use of those funds. So, but I just wanted to comment that tonight we're asking to reject the bids. You know, there were a lot of people involved in this whole park planning, a lot of input. And so if we were going to just stop and not do the project, I think we owe the opportunity to those people that were involved and others to express their thoughts to you, because I know you guys have had a few people talk to you about whether this competes with existing facilities.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that, and I mean, it's a big part of that whole park project. I mean, I think that was a big part of the use out there. I personally don't think it's a direct competition to some of the facilities that we have, but I could see people think that. I know Home Builders is booked every weekend during the good season, family reunions, parties, those kind of things, mainly because of the amenities. You got a swimming pool, you got a golf course, you got a zoo. And we've got the amenities that make that work. The other thing is the pricing. I mean, we rent that for very cheap. People can afford it. There's a lot of facilities on the commercial side that, you know, people can't afford. And so that's the other element that I think is important that we ought to think about.
Justin,
I've got a few comments here that I've been contacted by quite a few people in the community, and last week I had a call from a very from an individual that I have a high regard for, who we sat down and we went over this whole project, and he had been looking at this and apparently been involved in some conversations about this competitive situation, the state of the city's budget, and all of those things and so on. And so he posed some questions to me that I simply couldn't answer. And Angela, I don't want to put you on the spot this evening, and it may be something that we may want to get bond counsel and bond underwriters involved. But he posed a couple of interesting questions that was new to me in terms of this whole bonding piece. And let me refer to my notes here so I correctly ask the right questions here. Basically, it is that in the bond contract that we have, do we have provisions that provide to us what is called an extraordinary bond call or redemption provision? Extraordinary bond call or redemption provision.
I am not sure on this bond
Okay,
issue.
and this may be a bond counsel question, but
Yes.
basically, as I understand what this individual shared with me, is that an extraordinary redemption says may be triggered by bond proceeds remaining unexpended by a specified date, or the fact that the intended facility was never built. Now that's what he described to me, and basically what would occur here if we have that kind of provision in a contract, that we would take those bond proceeds at par value and pay off the bonds, and thus reducing the city's bond liability and interest expense. So we wouldn't be losing all that incurred expense that we have. And so, if I may, in terms of going forward with this, perhaps after we take formal action, that we could call upon bond counsel to come before us, or because this is a pretty major item of topic across the community. I can assure you of that. Because of the competitiveness and all of that, and I've got thoughts on that as well. But more directly, going forward, do we just simply try to divert or find another project to fit the $800,000? There's some that would say it's a use it or lose it situation, and I don't subscribe to that. I certainly do subscribe, and I would say this evening, I do subscribe to hopefully a commitment of $800,000 towards some form of a pavilion at Orchard Park. I can support that. I simply cannot support a $1.6 million project, and I don't think the staff supports that either.
no,
I don't think anybody supports
does.
that. So, going a little deeper into this bond, he's raised these questions. Another question, again, this gets kind of technical, Angela, but he also says, do we have the right of arbitrage in our municipal bond transactions? And if you're familiar with arbitrage, how that works, whether or not we have that right also to kind of slow this thing down somewhat and to evaluate what our provisions are with this extraordinary redemption provision, if that makes some sense to you.
Right, I'm aware of what arbitrage is.
Yes.
Our bond counsel has talked to me about that, and usually we have about 18 months to start spending that.
18
before
months?
Right.
We have to start calculating that. And the way the interest rate environment is right now, you look at whether the interest rate you can earn off of that money sitting in a bank is more than the interest you're paying on the loan.
Right.
We're getting like around 1% on our
Okay.
CDs, and we're
So
paying
we're not, yeah.
probably around 2.5–3% on this bond issue. So I don't think we're at the point where we would have to pay anything back to the IRS because of this arbitrage.
Because of the arbitrage? Yes.
Right.
Well, I don't know what the feelings of the council are, but I wanted to put this out this evening because I think it's worthy of investigating this somewhat in terms of this extraordinary redemption provision. So we've got better information in terms of what our options are.
I have seen where our bond issues are split between callable and non-callable, so that probably relates to what he's talking about. I don't believe all of our bonds are callable, so I don't know that we could do that with 100% of the proceeds, but it's definitely something I will ask our bond counsel.
If you would, I'd appreciate that.
Well, I think one thing we have to consider is how long did Kelly estimate it, excuse me, would take to redesign to fit within the bond available funds?
As far as the redesign, he didn't talk about a specific time, but he was wanting to target if we did go back out to bid with an alternate design of going to bid in January. His experience with bidding projects, he's always had slightly less bids in January as contractors are gearing up for the
they're hungry
for the next year. So just to put a time frame on that, if we bid it in January, probably would come to City Council in February. Construction then realistically would begin in April, March, April.
And that would still fall within the parameters of when
the
we had
18
to
months.
begin expending the funds, right?
Yeah, we bonded it. It was the summer or fall of 17. I should have asked.
Okay.
I thought it was about October. Am I
Yeah, you'd have to look
It was
that
October,
up.
November.
It was October. Okay, yeah, it might be in the memo.
Justin, is the amphitheater piece of the master plan completely separate from?
It is that's the last phase that we've not budgeted for at this point. In the original master plan, in that inner loop was to be developed with a playground, treehouse, a labyrinth, and an amphitheater. Amphitheater is one of those things that unless they're really in an urban area, they really don't get used. And so at this point, we just didn't feel like that was the best use of funds. For that, so the plan has been this would be the final phase of the building. I mean, we have conceptually what phase 5 could look like, but we weren't planning on asking for that phase at this point.
Okay, thank you.
With regards to a redesign, are those architectural fees considered in the price we've already paid?
He did offer to do any redesign at no additional cost.
Okay, thank you.
That's good to know.
Which is
Significant.
That's very significant.
John, I was very pleased with that.
Yeah.
That shows him taking some responsibility.
I agree with you 100%. That's
I was
the
not,
answer I
I
wanted
was
to
not
hear.
expecting that.
The answer I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
But I also think Kelly took a lot of responsibility, but we had ideas and from the group and all the different groups to build this thing, and it was going to be something, fairly special. So, there's some accountability on what we wanted as well.
Yeah, I could take some ownership. And I pushed him to make as nice a building as we could for the budget. I also pushed him on the budget issues. So I mean, he designed a great building. Just a little more than we can afford.
Well, and if there is no additional expense with what we're hearing now, the investment we've already made into it, all the
geotechnical
thank you, and all that
investigation
stuff,
and design.
that's, it makes it, difficult to walk away completely, and that's why I agree with John and others that said, there should be something out there, more in line with what we originally envisioned from a dollar and cent standpoint. It doesn't sound like there'd be any additional, above and beyond that.
At this point, to
Barring
reduce the scope of the project and bid it out and bring it back to City Council for approval, there's not an additional cost to that. If Kelly's committed to redesigning it, no fee, bid it out, and then see what the bids look like at that point, with no additional cost and what we've already invested in design fees and other things.
I don't want to dwell any further on this competition thing, but it's out there, and I think we need to listen. I really do. And I guess I'd like to perhaps have at a future meeting some additional information using the home builders and the pavilion at Rice Park, just some basic data. Number of times the facilities are rented, and specifically the types of groups that rent those facilities over, say, a 2 or 3 year period to give us some trend. We talk about in generalities, but I really would like to look at the types of groups that are renting that. And then also, what is the estimated cost to maintain those 2 current buildings? And does the rent offset the maintenance of these buildings? I guess just to get everything out on the table, I really would like to ask for that kind of information.
As far as numbers, rentals, that's something we can do really easy.
Sure.
Actually have it so
I'm sure you have it.
It's going to be hard to identify what the group was doing. We don't necessarily always get whether it's a birthday party or a family reunion or a West Star training. We don't not necessarily always get all that.
You don't always get.
Without giving away whom rented it, because there might be privacy issues, but you'll be able to see if it's an individual versus a corporation doing an event.
We can do that.
Yeah, I think we can come up with
that. If I could add to your homework as well, in the early slides you mentioned that there was a demand for this building in the first phase or whatever. If you could fill me in on what kind of demand that was. Was that part of the comprehensive planning or specific to this?
It was.
Part of the master plan.
And I'm not even asking today, but as you're gathering information, was it a strong demand?
Yeah, I've got all the survey results.
That's
and how many respondents of that survey marked a rental pavilion space.
I'd love to know that as well.
Yep. It seems like it was over half. I know.
Okay.
So it was in the top. I want to say it was the third most. I'll verify, but I think walking trails. I think they're in order.
Right.
Walking trails was number 1. The inclusive playground was number 2. I'll verify that.
If you wouldn't mind.
And rental pavilion was the third most common asked for element.
And that was conducted when, Justin?
2011.
2011.
Seven years
so
plus.
we've had some changes in the community subsequently. But I understand what John is saying about the clientele that are maybe perhaps more likely to rent this as opposed to Main Street Event Center, for example.
Yeah,
so
it's a different setting.
Yeah, it's a different environment.
Most people that use home builders, their party does not stay inside home builders. They're at the playground adjacent to it. They're at the zoo. They're at Salt City Splash. They use the park amenities along with the structure. That's what sets us apart from everyone else, and it makes our rentals different than it's something on Main Street or wherever it might be. So it's more of an amenity to the park. So.
When would you be timing-wise bringing something to us, or would you even need to in terms of the redesign, et cetera? Just in terms of the 18 months and
I think part of the conversation is, do we go through all that effort of redesign and rebid before we decide are we going to build
that's why I'm asking the question. I mean, what kind of how soon do we need to have a conversation that precedes that, so that if the go ahead is given, then there's still time to redesign, rebid, etc.
would say within the next month.
1st of October maybe, or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next month.
Sometime in
So-
September.
I don't want to waste, I agree, I don't want to waste Kelly's time and money by having
Right.
to design it
Yeah.
out. We've got a great relationship with Landmark, so. Yeah, I think within the next 60 days, if we could have a clear direction on whether to do to rebid it.
So if we have whatever conversations we're gonna have within the next 60 days, there'd be time that, and the go-ahead is given, there's time to do what needs to be done.
Still meet that January bid time, which is
Okay.
well within the timeframe of the
Okay.
bonds.
Right.
Well, then I think what I'm hearing is that we want some information, we want to have an opportunity for some
Want more
discussion.
information.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there's a desire to kill the project, but that I think is probably there among the mix in terms of discussion. And I think it's a matter of probably what the information tells us in
Right.
terms of how the current are being used. Nancy made the point, and that's why I asked the question of when was this survey done. A lot has happened in 7 years.
Sure.
So that I would think would be part of the mix as well. So I guess you guys decide when you can get that to us, and I would suggest probably the earlier the better. If we continue to have some further question beyond that, then it would be time opportunity if there's some more that we ask for.
And I do want that information, hopefully we can get that information on the bonding provisions as well. I think
Sure.
that's really, really important
Yeah.
to know what our options are.
Yeah.
For this project and potentially
And
future.
for other
And others,
projects, yeah.
With that being said, that's a whole lot of talk just to reject some bids.
Yeah.
But, I would move to reject all bids for construction of the new park pavilion at Riversbank Orchard Park.
And I will second.
Okay. Been a motion and a second to reject the bids. Any further discussion, council? Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Zabor?
Yes?
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes. Next item.
Item 9, report of city officials.
Nancy?
Nothing.
John?
I've got a couple things, sorry about that, but I'm going to go ahead anyway. I've got a kind of a minor question, but I've asked it before, and I just would like maybe to get a little update on the parking lot that was built across from Smith's Market, is scheduled to have lights put in there. And it's getting the fall and so on, and perhaps more use and so on. I'd just like to have a clarification as to when we might get those lights installed.
Jim is here to tell us.
Oh, Jim, or something.
Jim Sightnader, Downtown Development. The light fixtures that were installed in the parking lot across from the Fox or behind the Fox, there's several poles like that. The plan was to use those poles at that location. And with the change in leadership down at the engineering department, the loss of some personnel, it's just kind of stuck. But
And here
the
comes
poles, the poles are here that we own.
We're actually been working on the traffic lights on Main Street, and then also the warning sirens up north that we had one get hit by lightning earlier this year, and they were installing that today. So I don't know where it is on the timeline right at the moment, but it's been pushed back. So that's a good question.
How can we push it up,
Well,
forward?
we just, it depends on personnel.
Is
at
it
this point.
personnel?
It is
And-
personnel.
And we do have a lot of high priority traffic
Okay.
light issues that, and we
Yeah.
got the one across from the library that Nancy's talked about forever, and
Yep.
we've
And
got a
school-
lot
and school
going
has
on there,
started,
and
so we
and we're
want that.
down to, anyway, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
So
thank you for the update. So,
We'll work on it, get it.
second question, this is kind of a far out question, but this is something I think I'd like to just put on the table this evening. We read last week about our neighbors to the south in South Hutchinson and the issues they're having with their budget. And I'm just wondering whether or not it would be in order for us as good neighbors to reach out and to initiate a conversation in some form to see whether or not now may be a more appropriate time to think about perhaps some, I can use the big C word, consolidation or merger, but not necessarily, but are there some efficiencies that the two governing bodies could take a look at I have no expectations. I know the fire chief has had some views on that contract there, and I'd just like to put that on the table as to whether or not that would be worthy of a reaching out from city council to city council, and to have a conversation to see if there is any interest whatsoever in developing those kinds of relationships.
I would be open to it. Any conversation is worth having. You learn a lot by doing it. Whether it bears fruit or not, that remains to be seen. But just to broach the conversation, I would not be afraid of that at all. We'd have to see if they were receptive to it, of course. But yeah,
I think I read once that Kansas is either number 1 or number 2 in the number of governmental
I think
units.
it's number 1.
A lot of government.
So I think a lot of people consider it a dirty word, but I think that's the direction we probably need to be going with limited resources. I'd be totally open to it, just not sure they would be.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's an excellent idea.
It's worth talking.
Yep, worth talking about.
John, you ready to?
How would that happen then? Would this be something that the mayor would initiate a conversation with the South Hutchinson mayor? Is that the appropriate thing to do?
Probably so. There's not a
City
counterpart to
administrator.
John
No.
at this point, so probably.
I don't think they want to.
That's an
And-
assignment for the mayor then.
What's that?
Assignment for the mayor.
That's an
Yeah.
assignment for the mayor.
Yeah.
All right.
I'd be happy to be part of any of that if in order, but if not, you certainly are capable of reaching out to those folks.
All right. Let me give some thought, have some conversation, but
Very
yeah,
good.
I'd be glad to do that.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay. David?
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Jade?
Nothing, thank you.
Well, let me see. No, I don't have anything. John?
I don't have anything either. Mayor.
All right. How much time do
They
we?
said 30 minutes.
Does it
So
say
what's that
30
put us?
minutes there?
Would 8:45 be adequate? That's a little short of the 30.
Potentially, yeah.
Would you? Okay, I would move to recess into executive session pursuant to the employer-employee negotiations exception, KSA 75-4319B3, in order to discuss issues related to 2019 contract negotiations with the city's bargaining units. The open meeting to resume the city council chamber at 8:45 p.m.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion on that motion?
Nope.
Hearing none. Call roll, please. Linda?
Dave Line,
Yes?
Pyros de Carvalho,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Inskeep,
Yes.
Deckett.
Yes. Not too many left in the non-city